everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode. This is a question and answer based podcast. Look, if y'all have questions about OCD, you can't find a therapist, your therapist is just really weird because they probably are. There's a lot of us that are super, myself, we're all just, they're weird. So if you're working with a therapist, disregard that. If you have questions just about OCD for any stinking reason, you can, and anxiety disorders for that matter. I am all over the place today. You can go over to fearcastpodcast.com and you can send me a message and I will read it, consider it, and likely put it up in a future episode. Now, if you want to skip the line, go to the tippy top of the line, then you can record an audio question. Go over to Fearcast Podcast as well. You can click on the record button. It's at the top right of the page. It's elsewhere on the page. Send me a recording. I'm getting a lot of recordings from that place. It's super easy. Now, it only limits you to 90 seconds, granted, but you can record multiple, I will email you just to double check that you are okay with the terms of use. Just letting y'all know, if you send one, you're getting an email from me. Anyways, send me a question over there. You can also go over to Instagram. I'm Fearcast Podcast over there. You can send me an audio question by sending me a DM. Again, those go to the tip at the top of the list. Today's question started as an audio question. I'm honoring it as an audio question, but the person backed out, didn't want their voice up. I don't do this normally, but I wanted to put this one up here because we haven't had a question like this in a while. So, this is a question from Jeffrey. I'm so tempted to call him Joffrey. It's Jeffrey, and I'm going to go with Jeffrey on this. So it's a really good question. It's a challenging question for a lot of reasons, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But send me a question. We're getting more of those, and it's great. That means we're going to be getting more audio questions. It just adds to the dynamic of it. It makes it more interesting. It shows that there are real people out there just like you who are experiencing OCD and anxiety disorder thoughts. So, yeah. So I don't really have much else to talk about. If anybody is gearing up for the online conference, it sounds like it's going to be great. There's a ton of people going to be up there. The Scrupulosity, the faith-based OCD mini conference is happening coming up soon. Check that out if religious scrupulosity is your thing. It's going to be great. There's a ton of great speakers up there. And what else is going on? I don't know. But you know what? I threw my back out again today. You want to know how I did it? Stretching. The thing I'm supposed to do to help with my back. Messed up my back. So nothing is safe. Nothing is safe. So live in fear, everybody. I think that's the moral of this story. So if you're doing something you think is helpful, it might not be. That's what I learned today. I don't know what you learned today about life, but that's what I did. So obviously there's tongue in cheek with that. Hopefully by now, y'all know my sense of humor and what I think is funny and what probably just ultimately isn't and is probably offensive. But that's what's going to happen. So it might be a shorter episode today based on that. I did a little bit more stretching to try to undo the stretching that I just undid myself with. And hopefully it will be better. We will see. But don't worry. Hopefully it will go away, because otherwise I have a fun weekend in the mountains where we'd be fishing and walking a lot, and maybe even horseback riding, which is really, really going to feel bad. So here's hoping. All right. Why don't I stop yammering? So today's question, by the way, trigger warning, I guess. You know how much I hate trigger warnings. I'm going to say it anyways, because you never know if you never know who's listening. All right. So we're going to be talking about sex. We're going to be talking about sex-related things and topics related to that. So if you don't want to hear that, or if you don't want the littles in the room to also hear that, turn it off. Okay, we're back. All right. So we're going to go over Jeffrey's question. Jeffrey's question. So I'll go with the question first, essentially what the question is, and then get into it. I'm going to read it today. We've gone over that. All right. So Jeffrey says, if there's any tips on how to forgive myself and how the past doesn't define who I am, that would be greatly appreciated. I just want to forgive myself and not let the past haunt me forever. Please read below. Jeffrey, I will. So let's get on to it. So they say, it all started at the young age, around 12, possibly earlier. So don't worry, it's not as lengthy as that makes it sound. All right, when I was growing up, a family member once said to me that the fourth child is always gay. Having already dealt with OCD, things like door checking, etc., I already had traces of it. And of course, my anxiety latched on to that comment, since I, as you all guessed, was the fourth child. As the years went by, not understanding what happened, I genuinely thought I was gay. Around 17 or 18, I ended up using a webcam and masturbating with guys online for about 2 years. Due to my anxiety and false arousal, I thought I enjoyed it, but I could never bring myself to actually sleep with a guy. After all that, I finally saw a therapist expecting him to tell me that I was in the closet. By that point, I'd been battling this demon in my head for about 7 years. However, I learned that it was something called OCD, and still to this day, I can't say I fully understand it. Later on, I went to a psychic. This is where you know it's going to get good. Went to a psychic. When I asked the question, am I gay? He shuffled the deck, and a male card showed up. I asked if that meant I was gay, and he said, no, however, it's something I should explore. But my mind still latched onto it. What are the chances of that happening? Could the energy in the deck somehow know more than therapists or science? What if science was wrong and can't prove it, and the therapists are wrong too? I've had 2 clinical psychologists and a professor all tell me this is classic OCD. It is. It's classic OCD. I also saw someone on YouTube who claimed to have OCD, but also said he was bisexual. And then he said, you can't be gay and have HOCD. HOCD, homosexual OCD, we now call it sexual orientation OCD. We'll get to this in a moment. He goes on to say, yet he also claimed to be bisexual. To be bi, you would do what a gay person would do. So that was really confusing. I guess the message I'm trying to say is don't believe everything you see or hear. I agree with you, Jeffrey. Because of my past experiences and the webcam stuff, my mind always latches onto that as evidence that I'm lying to myself about being bi or gay. And now I'm now 28, happily married to my beautiful wife, and she's been my rock throughout all this. No matter how much reassurance I get from professionals, even 3 of them, now 4, me, my mind tells me they're all wrong. But a person shuffling cards somehow knows my true identity. From my experience, no matter how much reassurance I get, it's never enough. My biggest issue is letting go of my past, as I see it as evidence of being gay, and I can't forgive myself for it. Every therapist says OCD goes against how we see the world, which then causes stress. You can't fear something you already are, and there is no confusion. Yet, I still can't let that sink in. They go on to say, they sent me a further follow-up email. They said, further to the below, which is the above, which is what I just read. I'm generally curious to why HOCD was changed to SO-OCD, sexual orientation OCD. Was that because gay people experiencing OCD about being straight, or because to my knowledge, a straight person that worries / has OCD about being gay can't be gay or bi? All right. That is Jeffrey's question. All right, Jeffrey, that's a great question. There's a lot in there. I'm going to try to pull out some stuff that can be helpful for you. And hopefully some of this will either be helpful to a lot of people, or I'm going to get some angry emails from a lot of people. I expect both. Bring it on. I thrive on your hate. All right. So first, let's talk about the last part first. So why it was changed from HOCD to sexual orientation OCD. Now, when I first heard this switch, when I first read SO-OCD, I thought it was a joke. I thought people were saying they are so OCD, right? You hear this a lot, right? People are like, "Oh, I'm so OCD. and then fill in the blank with something incredibly trivial, right? But I have to do that because I'm so particular or so different and so weird, or unique or whatever they think it is. Anyway, so sexual orientation OCD. And also, I'll be honest, I think if you listen to past episodes, I was a slow adopter of it because I suppose my worry about it was I didn't want to constantly change things up or constantly change the names of it to who knows what. But either way, we changed it. And I'm now on board. I am a supporter of sexual orientation OCD. And here's why. The term HOCD, homosexual OCD, it makes it seem like it is just about homosexuality, right? Which leaves out people who identify as gay or bisexual or any other letter within the LGBT alphabet, and they are worried that maybe deep down they're actually straight and they're just lying to themselves, right? We joked and called it reverse HOCD or straight OCD, but again, we're giving more names to it, right? So it also leaves out things like I don't know, fill in the blank, right? My brain is so fried and my back hurts so much. So we're just going to go with it. So sexual orientation OCD actually is more inclusive because it ultimately just says there is an obsession going on that is, at the end of the day, it is OCD. It is an obsession, a story that brings anxiety. What if blank is true? What if I don't understand blank about myself? If I do blank, then blank might happen. And then it causes this anxiety. Oh no, what if that thing does happen? Or what if that thing will happen? Or what if I am that thing? Or what if I discover this about myself? Or fill in the blank, right? I don't want that to happen. Oh no, I feel uncomfortable. Let me do something about this to try to make sure that thing doesn't happen. These are called compulsions. That makes me feel better. Oh, relief. And then it goes back to reinforcing that thought because now whenever I get this thought, I know what to do and I have to go through this whole rigmarole to make sure that I do the thing. Okay. It's OCD. That is OCD. That is every type of OCD we've ever talked about. It's also basically every type of anxiety, but that's a separate conversation. All right. So it's OCD about one's sexual orientation. We can even broaden it out to say it's just OCD about sexually related topics or sexually related information, right? So it can absolutely include somebody who is worried about maybe that they are gay, maybe that they're bisexual, maybe that they're identifying as bisexual, but maybe they're actually gay or actually straight. Maybe they are actually identifying as bisexual or gay, but they're worried that they're straight. You can pick any permutation, but it is an obsession about one's sexual orientation. Now, let me then be clear about it. So, all right, I hope that makes sense, right? It is more inclusive, it is more accurate, and it is also it's less stigmatizing because it's just more descriptive. It is an obsession, OCD, about your sexual orientation. That's it. Okay. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I might get hate about this, but we cannot and should not use the presence of sexual orientation OCD as evidence of your desired sexual orientation, okay? Instead, we want to use your historical desired attraction, not the presence of anxiety or fear as proof of what your sexual orientation is. Okay, now this might bring on the hate, but I've talked to people who say, well, I can't be gay because I have sexual orientation OCD. So therefore, I am absolutely straight. All right. Now, first off, if that worked, great, mazel tov, live your dream. But it never works because then their brain goes, well, but what if you are gay? And goes, no, but I have HOCD. See, I therefore, or sexual orientation OCD, I must be straight. We call that in the biz a compulsion, right? You're trying to verify, prove one thing. And what you're doing is you're engaging with the content of the obsession, right? This is the biggest point here, is that when you engage in the content of this obsession and ruminate about what the story is about you and think that if you fix the obsession, you'll fix the fear, and you won't, okay? What that narrative does is it tries to divert you into this narrative about some other fear, and we'll talk about the feared story. We've talked about the feared story before. I'm going to bring in a little ICBT in just a moment. It says, if you just solve that, get reassurance, positive reassurance, firm, solid reassurance that you are who you believe you are, then all of this will go away. But the problem is you spend hours and hours and hours trying to prove that, and then what it does is you get that moment of reassurance. You go, oh, good. See, I am straight. See, I reflected on the fact that I have sexual orientation OCD, so therefore I am actually bisexual, or I'm actually gay because I said that I am, or I'm actually straight because I have this fear, right? But then it says, but what if you don't really know who you are? And then you're back to the races, right? OCD isn't a thought problem, it is a feeling problem. The anxiety is there that is driving you to this rumination, driving you to step out of what you believe to be true about yourself. As you've heard me talk about before, trust your compulsive conclusion, right? It's that thing that you're fighting for. What are you fighting for that you believe so strongly to be true about yourself? What if that were true? What if it were? So if you're, presumably, Jeffrey, you're fighting so hard to prove that you're straight, what if you actually were? What if you believed it? Would you spend any amount of time further ruminating? Would you spend any amount of time going back in the past and playing stories over and comparing it, contrasting it, thinking about what that says about who you are? Instead, you keep fighting for this one thing. I would encourage you to act as if that's true, which means that we drop our compulsion. We act as if that thing is a fact, right? So that's a long, confusing, perhaps, thing, but it's again, we can't be using this the evidence of the obsession as proof of something. Okay, what it's proof of is there is anxiety and rumination, proves that there is OCD at play. Okay, so we've talked about. I've teased a little bit, but I know we talked about in the past what the feared story is. So, Jeffrey, I wonder what all of this means for you. Okay, what is the fear for you? Is it that you don't truly know who you are? Maybe you're not who you're quote supposed to be. So you're not authentically you. You're supposed to be someone or something or some identity else than you are. Maybe it's that like your true self, your true deep down real self is just this time bomb that's going to go off and destroy your life somewhere ages and ages hence, right? So therefore, you have to be on the lookout. You have to watch out for it and plan for it and identify and squash or disprove something that's going to prevent that time bomb from going off, or at least you can get out in front of it and you can, do the quote right thing, whatever the story might be. Or is it like you'll just never really know yourself or be confident in who you are? I don't know. And these are all things to pull apart with your therapist. And I'm going to recommend that you work with a therapist if you aren't currently working with one to help pull some of these things apart that I'm talking about and coming to a place of acceptance with a lot of things. There's a lot of moving parts to this story, right? Let's see here. I don't know if I fully addressed that part. Let's go back to it. No, I think I did. This is the question about, or that point about somebody online saying that they are, what is it? That you can't be gay or you can't be bi and have HOCD at the same time. Yes, you can. It just means that you are, if you identify as bisexual, if you genuinely recognize that you have an attraction to both men and women, and it doesn't mean that it is exactly 50-50. It might mean that you are physically attracted to one and romantically attracted to the other, or there is a 51% difference or whatever variation. It doesn't then mean that you are 50-50. It's bisexuality is on a spectrum, as is sexuality is on a spectrum. It gets wildly confusing. And hence why OCD loves it, because there aren't these like firm, strict boxes that, people in anxiety love. Humans love boxes and predictability. We just love them. All right. Where was I getting at here? All right. So this feared story. I would encourage you to consider what this feared story is. What is all of this about? What is the worry truly about? You say that you are married. You say that you love your wife. You say, and I'm presuming this is a female identifying, female presenting, perhaps cisgendered. There's a lot of variation we can talk about. I'm going to presume maybe the simplest explanation when you're emailing me this is a biological woman that you are theoretically in love with, that you loved enough or liked enough to get married to, and you say she's your rock through all of this, right? It sounds like you like her. So, so again, going back to what is the fear with all of this, right? I confused myself. All right, let's get on to let's keep going with this. So with this feared story, ICBT, I think, offers a really good discussion about this. ICBT talks about this as the feared possible self, right? So which module is this? I'm forgetting. I think it's 4. It's somewhere in there. Point is that it talks about this fear of who you could be, fear of who you could become. What is this person that's like hidden or deep down that like you're worried you could become this person, so you're desperately working to not be this person, whatever it might be. You can think about like someone who has harm OCD. They have this worry that what if they are actually this very violent person underneath, so they're desperately trying to not do that. So they might avoid knives, avoid violent thoughts, avoid violent movies. They might go the extra mile and try to do extra nice things for people, right? Maybe it's someone who is a very identified religious person, and they have this fear of what if I'm actually, a blasphemer, right? Well, that's their feared possible self. They aren't that presently, but what if they are? What if they deep down they will be, or they'll become this, right? So they're going to go through their life and scrutinize their religious practice. They're going to ruminate about their religious practice. They're going to pray perfectly. They're going to confess. They're going to do all the religious practices perfectly, just to ensure that feared possible self isn't going to come to fruition. So ICBT talks a little bit about the difference between the feared self and the true self, right? Now, the true self, I think, can be an overextension, but it's kind of this like, think about the true self as like the person that you historically have been, like the person that you are working yourself to be. They differentiate that from like the values kind of act-based, like who's the person that we're trying to work into. They'll talk about it as, and someone out there, some angry person, not some angry person, Bronwyn Stroyer, the person who did my training, she's out there just angry at me for getting this wrong, I'm assuming. But point is that it's like, what's the evidence say about who you are? What does the evidence say about your character, your behaviors, your religious practice, your safety, the love that you have for other people, the attractions that you do have, the relationships that you do carry forward with? What does that say about you? Not these individual pockets of things, these examples, these behaviors, these things. What is the overall story? So I'll just read this from, what is this? Anxiety Specialists of St. Louis. They have a good little article on this, just as a summary. So they kind of differentiate between these two things. What's the difference between the true self and the feared self? They say, true self, you make decisions based on your values, not your fears, right? It says you look at your full history, not one thought or moment. You use context, right? I want to talk about that too. You know that being uncertain doesn't mean that you're dangerous, right? And I'll say this, just because you're afraid of something doesn't mean that you are attracted to it, right? Just because you feel fear and worry and nervousness, so in other words, heightened emotions, is not the same as attraction, right? Two different things. I'll just say this here. A good episode is going to be an episode I did a while ago with Chris Tronsden on sexual orientation OCD. He offers some great analogies and some great things to think about, especially when it comes to that rumination about like what do these heightened emotions mean about me, and what does attraction feel like. So go check that episode out. I forget what number it is, but it's a Fearcast episode with Chris Tronsden, who's fantastic in every possible way. Go watch his stuff. If you're in OCD land, you've heard of him. He is everywhere. He's everywhere. How is he everywhere all at once? He's probably in the room with you right now. I don't know. He might be here. I don't know. So, all right, feared self. So the feared self is then, it's built up from hypotheticals, right? What ifs, doubts, and worst case logic, right? It shows up with qualifiers like, well, what if I'm just pretending, right? Well, so like, what if I'm not who I really say I am, but what if I'm this whole other thing, right? So again, it's hypothetical. And there's this feeling of urgency. This demands action to feel safe, right? We've talked about have-tos versus get-tos. OCD takes get-tos, just interests and questions and things that we could consider, and turns them into obligations. It turns them into these absolute, terrifying have-tos. So I love the difference between these two. So Jeffrey, where do you fall in that, right? It sounds like there's an overall story to you that you have historically been attracted to women. Historically, you are currently married to one. Presumably, again, you like them and are attracted to them, and attracted to women enough that you are fighting against this what if that maybe all of that is false. What if all that's wrong based on these events, right? ICBT goes on, or actually previous to that, in Module 2, it talks about how this story is built. And I think this is a huge, big deal for you. So it talks about like these 5 different points. I love this about ICBT. So it talks about like how OCD's logic is produced, right? And the point of it is just to show like what the story is, what's its argument that's trying to pull you into it. It's not saying it's absolutely right. It's saying this is what OCD is saying, and this is how it justifies the compulsion and justifies you going down the rabbit hole. So it talks about abstract facts and ideas, right? So just what are things that are true? Like what are just facts about life? The second is general rules, right? Things that we generally know to be true, rules that we ought to follow, that we generally do follow. Hearsay is kind of stuff that we've just like heard, maybe stories we've heard in the news, stories we've heard through the grapevine, right? Like posts that we read or just headlines that we read, and we just extrapolate that onto ourselves or into our life. Because like if it happened to that person, well, gosh, it could happen to me too. Personal experiences, right? I think this is jumping onto you for sure. Like I've had this personal experience doing this thing. Well, OCD grabs onto that and capitalizes on this and says, well, because of this thing, well, therefore this whole other thing, right? So because of this event happening, therefore this whole other it then wraps up all this other stuff. It doesn't say anything about this necessarily, this one point. It brings in more context, more story based on this. I almost say because of this personal experience, all this other stuff is true. And the last point is just like it's possible. Like all evidence could point to one thing, but boy, you know what? It's possible. Look, all evidence points to there not being the apocalypse today. But it could happen, I guess, right? We've been talking about the apocalypse a lot, I guess. But so that's the argument. That's the story, right? A huge piece, Jeffrey, that I'm hearing. When you shared that story just at the very beginning of this, and you were talking about, you heard this story really, early on in your life that the 4th child is gay. And gosh, don't you know it? You're the 4th child. Well, that's probably for a lot of people is going to stick in their mind. And sometimes it feels like, depending on who said it, like, gosh, it can feel like authoritative fact, right? Hey, the 4th child is gay. Well, shoot, I'm the 4th child. Well, therefore, I must be gay, right? Because this person wouldn't lie to me. This entity, this outlet, this news, whatever, they wouldn't lie to me because they know the truth, right? By the way, this is where aunts and uncles are the worst. You know what lie my uncle tried to pass off on us dumb kids? He tried to say, all the boulders that we see were accumulated from little pebbles that we saw, and they just kind of snowballed and progressively became this big giant rock. And we went, interesting. I didn't know that. Anyway, yep. And so we went, here's another lie. He said that, and it's just preposterous that this is in my head. He said, well, men are better at directions, don't you know? Because we have a special bone in our nose that can kind of serve as this compass that we know directions better, right? Now, is that ridiculous and sexist? Yes. Is that a story that I believe to be true? Absolutely not. Is that a thing that shows up in my brain from time to time and I sometimes think about? Also, yes. Um, so we hear things, and this is where that hearsay comes in, right? These little stories can jump in and just start to snowball if OCD grabs onto it, and it becomes this whole other thing, right? All right, so I'm going to try to not belabor this because I think we're going. Oh man, we're going long already. And I said this is going to be a short podcast. Here I am being a liar. Um, so one thing to also consider, and I'll let you look this up a little bit more, but is in some ways that we can challenge this. And I had an idea to also contrast this with alternative thought records from cognitive behavioral therapy, because I am not. I'm here for what works. So some people really resonate with ICBT stuff. Some people really resonate with CBT stuff. CBT and ERP being being like the gold standard. And if that doesn't work, we go with, ICBT. I want to do what's going to help people. So the alternative thought record is looking at what is the feared story, and then what are other ways to think about it. So it's not like on the spectrum of good stuff to bad stuff. The thought you have is like firmly in the bad stuff section. So what is a more realistic, rational, logical, reasonable, rational, I think I've said that already, way to consider this ongoing, right? So that's the idea, is we're trying to come up with something more reasonable. It doesn't say that it's absolutely a fact, but it's saying there is so much more evidence for this than there is for that one. And then we want to act as if the thing that has more evidence and logic and reason and support behind it is more real, right? And generally speaking, that's how we live our life, right? But OCD wants to grab onto the minuscule, hypothetical, possible, really remote possibility and say that is more likely and reasonable in your life. So that's one of the ways we can challenge this. But part of this, I would also encourage you to look up arousal non-concordance, right? You talked about this point where if you said like 17 or 18 and you were masturbating with other dudes online using a webcam. Now, there can be, and this is the part where I would encourage you to process this with a therapist and not just listen to some podcaster who doesn't know you, doesn't talk to you, can't process and expand upon this with you, is that there, with arousal and sexuality, there can be things that are arousing, but we are not into the entirety of it, okay? There can be points of, all right, masturbating with other guys. That doesn't then mean that you are inherently gay. There can be aspects of that you found arousing, but that you don't want the entirety of, right? It talks about these things that are like, it's the accelerators towards arousal, and there are these brakes of arousal, like stop the whole train from moving forward. And perhaps there was part of that you found arousing, and perhaps part of it that you found unarousing at all. And why I bring that up is not to give you more crap to ruminate about, but is to talk about and look at that situation and say, well, we need to look at that story that your brain is saying from this personal experience, right? Go back to the ICBT bit. This personal experience the story is, it says this grand thing about you. I wonder if it does. If it does it or does it not? And part of that is we want to look at the parts of it, not the entirety of it, and make that story bigger. But there's a part of acceptance to say, I might have liked this bit, but that doesn't mean this other bit is true about me either. And I know that there are going to be people out there who are going to be angry at this conversation or are going to be triggered by it. But this is what therapy is about. It's looking at those things and challenging it, and then looking at how do we sit with anxiety, fear, discomfort with that, and make space for the reality that this seems incongruous with us, or incongruent with who we believed or what we believed to be true about sexuality and ourselves, and trying to find a way to live the life of value, live your true self with this as a fact about who you were and what you had done. I'll give you a really, really bad comparison, okay? So a really bad comparison is, I like shooting guns, all right? Guns are super fun. To my non-American listeners, you're going, well, of course you do. You're American. Of course you shoot guns. You probably have a gun with you right now. Chris Tronston is hiding in your office with a gun. I don't know. Probably not. But it's, but maybe. it's super fun. I like precision sports, so archery, darts, those sort of things, super fun. Guns are just another version of that, right? So I like that component to it, but I don't like a lot of the other gun culture stuff that's associated with it. Now, if your brain can wrap those things up together and say, if you like one, you like the rest of it. But what we want to try to do with parts of our life is to also say, I can like this bit, but I don't have to like this bit. I can identify with this bit, but this whole other bit, I do not have to own as who I am at all, right? So what part of this are we accepting and what part do we not have to accept? Okay. That is one thing I will encourage you to pull apart further with a therapist, to talk through with somebody, not to just go up in your head and to ruminate for another 100 hours. Okay. So, all right, let's get to this bit. How can you let yourself off the hook? What was the specific thing? How can you forgive yourself? The first thing that I'm going to encourage you to do, I've encouraged you to do a lot. Let me recant that first line. We need to resist compulsions. We need to resist compulsive rumination, compulsive checking, compulsive thinking about who we are, what we are, comparing the past, right? There are some great articles out there. Go check out the book from Lauren Rosen about mental compulsions. That will probably be a great resource for you. I should have Lauren on again to talk about that book. But it's catching yourself when you're going back into this story and going back into those pieces of evidence that your brain says as something that is indicative of who you are. Catch yourself in that and resist furthering into that story. Resist furthering into that obsessive, the OCD bubble, as the ICB-2 will call it. I call it OCD land. Resist getting into that narrative, because it's not going to get you anywhere. You've already thought about it, and it hasn't produced the result that you want, right? Instead, I want you to acknowledge that there's this urge, this temptation, this desire to get into that, to satisfy something, to get to an understanding of it. I wonder if, as you said, it's to forgive yourself, to let yourself off the hook. I wonder also, you said forgive yourself, but of what, right? Forgive yourself of the past? Forgive yourself of making choices at a time in your life that perhaps you would now do something different, that you now regret. But in the context, in that moment, you made a choice based on certain things. I don't know what those things were. You mentioned that you felt anxious and you felt you didn't use the word confused. Due to my anxiety and false arousal, I thought I enjoyed it. Right? I thought I enjoyed it. What you're telling me is that there was at a time that you thought that was enjoyable, and that times have changed and you changed your mind. So there was putting that into context, it doesn't reflect who you currently are, who you're trying to be, who you desire to be at this point in life. I think this is an incredible point, and this is where real event OCD can jump in, and some of the lessons from that. It's acknowledging that we do make choices based on the context that we're in, and sometimes we regret those choices, right? But those individual choices don't then mean that's who we are or what we're about. It's that sometimes we make choices that we would do differently. So I would encourage you to resist the effort to go back in and shame yourself, punish yourself, beat yourself up for these choices, if they are choices that you no longer stand by. But acknowledge that they were part of who you were and a choice that you made at a time, but that they are two different things. You are not your experience, and that experience is not a defining characteristic of everything that you are or will be, but it's part of you, right? I played baseball once, or not once. I played a season of baseball in elementary school. It does not mean that I am a baseball player. I swam in high school and did pretty well, and I liked it. But you know what? I am not a swimmer, right? And we could go into all the regrets that I have, and trust me, they are legion. But they are not who we are. It's who we are trying to be. Remember that definition of our true self, right? It says you look at your full history, not one thought or moment, and you use context. It's important. A compassionate phrase may be helpful here, and I'll just give a quick one that I jotted down. So a compassionate statement and encouragement that you could offer yourself is, I'm allowed to make choices in life that I later regret or would do differently. And my past regrets do not make me who I am, but my continued efforts to craft who I am and who I have been over time is what makes me, me. So it's acknowledging you're working on being this person and that this is thing from the past, but dwelling on that, ruminating on that, and spending your time in that doesn't move you further forward. It just keeps you stuck in that past. So I think that's all I'll say at this time. So, Jeffrey, I hope this helps, and I can certainly appreciate that the worry about sharing your voice on the podcast. And I will also say to everybody else who does share their voice that it takes a point of bravery to share your voice. And I and the other listeners appreciate that. And Jeffrey, I know this has been a scary question to ask, and that's why I also wanted to answer that and give you some stuff to think about. Will this podcast and will my saying this is OCD eliminate it? No, it won't. What will help is by acknowledging that there are these thoughts and there is a temptation to pull into this or go and separate from your life, your present life, your values, what you're trying to do, and go into this narrative to solve it and to understand it and to put it to bed or quiet it down in order for you to live your life. But instead, it's going to be an and. There will be this thought and there will be an awareness or a reminder of the past, as we all have. I remember there's a funny meme of Yao Ming, who's a basketball player who's incredibly tall, in a crowd of people who are not incredibly tall, and it's like all the crowd is like the label is like all my positive experiences and happy memories, and then it's like Yao Ming, the one that like obviously sticks out. It's like that. It's the caption is like that one thing I did in junior high. Or that one time I misspoke. I'm forgetting it. I'll try to put it up here somewhere on the visual for you all. But that's kind of what happens with our brain. It reminds us of that thing from the past and goes, that thing is who we are. That's what we're about. I get those from time to time because it's human and it sucks. But we're acknowledging that it's there. We let it go. We're not trying to get stuck in it. Instead, keep moving forward into your values. So again, Jeffrey, hope that was helpful. Everybody else out there, hope that was helpful. So until next time, everybody, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.